Hopefully no one. I tried to give her a fist bump and I missed. All right, so the continuation. So how does everyone feel about your readiness after going through that? Let's say who feels like they're less than 5? So you're in that 1 to 5 territory of your data readiness. All right, who feels like they're greater than 5? So you're level 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So this session, we are going to take this a little bit deeper into the world of zero-party data, first-party data, data blending, building dashboarding. We are actually going to share some pretty cool reporting that we were able to build with Elevar data. So you can see the potential that you'll have coming up here. So they are all getting mic'd up. So we'll have Faye from Source Medium, John, who listens to our podcast, by the way, the Conversion Tracking Playbook podcast. All right, you are the only 2 listeners still. Thank you, Adrian, for continuing to support. I think we're on, no one's giving me crap yet because I missed the last week or 2 prepping for this, but we're on episode 87. So the Conversion Tracking Playbook, John he's a co-host, he's on there half the time. And we just talk about, for those that do listen to it, we just talk about what's going on today. So naturally, the next couple of episodes we'll be getting into what we're seeing with iOS 17, that's out. But anyways, I'm just buying time here, waiting for them to get mic'd up, to be honest with you. I won't dance. All right, so anyways, John will be up here, and then Matt. Where's Matt? Matt's getting mic'd up as well. Okay. Who's doing post-purchase surveys? All right, what is the most interesting question that isn't the how did you hear about us? What's the most interesting question that you've asked and provided an insight that you were not anticipating? All right, Dylan, I'm glad I paid you that $20 to always ask a question. All right. Question, so his post-purchase question, what made you inspired to buy? And what were the results that were unexpected?
On that.
I'm glad we got those last 2 words. So just open-ended questions. I think that, so even with Elevar, we've had the how did you hear about us in our sign-up flow for 3 years. So similar, but it's interesting just hearing how people do hear about us. So I think that's what Dylan is getting to. I'll share a story. I think I've shared this a couple times. So when Matt was on an early episode of the podcast, he shared an example of, I'm probably going to butcher, I'm definitely not going to try to name the brand, so I really don't butcher it since we are live streaming. But it was looking at what are you using this product for? And all of their ad creative was dirt bikes. Matt, shake your head if I'm going to get into the story right. So all of their ad creative was dirt bikes, and then they're asking, the post-purchase question was, what are you using this product for? And I don't know, 80, 90% of the answers were their ATVs or 4-wheelers. They had like, holy cow, we're advertising dirt bikes, but they're using it for for ATVs. They just switched their ad creative, and then you can guess the results that happen there. So there's a lot of different ways to use questions outside of just how did you hear about us? Yeah, you can come on up. I'm running out of stories here to buy time. All right, so
we need that chair.
Yeah, I'll move it. That can be mine. You guys I'll get it. All right, so we are going to give you the clicker when I'm done. Do a quick intro. The analytics stack ladder, we're going to go through again as a framework just to set the stage, and then Faye will be going through a presentation. So before we do that, let's do just a quick intro. So Faye, we'll start with you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Faye. I'm the founder of Source Medium. So what we do is we provide out-of-the-box data infrastructure for ambitious brands. I actually have a whole slide about that. I'm not going to go.
All right, we'll skip it. I'm already behind.
Yeah, but I used to sell mattresses back in the days. So a lot of learnings from growing a mattress brand. So if anybody want to talk about that, I'll be around.
Matt?
I'm Matt. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Faring. As Brad mentioned, we're a post-purchase survey solution. We help brands solve attribution, personalization, customer research, CRO with direct from consumer data.
And I'm John Cairo, the solutions engineer at Elevar.
And the podcast co-host.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start Analytics Stack Ladder here. So the way we structured this is just going through examples of, okay, what are all the different types of data that we can collect? Obviously, everyone is different in what you need, but building up can get us to, okay, what's your data warehouse look like? Where are the different data sources coming from? So I'll do the first one. So just looking at just your basic plugins. So this isn't an Elevar or any company pitch up here, but just obviously make sure you're collecting the basics. So your Google Analytics data, your Facebook data, your Google Ads data. For context, we'll get questions, hey, should we, if we're not using GA4, should we still even have GA4 running and collecting GA4 data? My view on this is yes, it's a pipeline to Google Ads, so it'd almost be like we're going to turn off the Facebook pixel, but what if you want to turn advertising back on in 6 months for Facebook? If you disabled it, then you're starting at an audience of 0. So that's what we mean by just the basic plugin. So you can fill this out on the right, you can write down what you're using. The second level is obviously when we get into Elevar, and this is continuing, at least what we see in our world, and we have different ways of just, again, analyzing anonymous data. So who's coming back to your site that appears to be anonymous to trackers, but we should be able to recognize them. And that's where the session enrichment product that we released earlier in Q1 this year, where our job is to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to recognize that user so we can enrich that data and send it to whether it's GA, Facebook, Google Ads, Attentive, SendLane, Klaviyo, whoever it might be, anyone. So that's a big part of what we look at as enriching your first-party data. The second part of that onion is once you have that, it doesn't necessarily, it's not owned by Elevar per se. That's where the conversation we just had with BigQuery and if you just toggle that on in GA4 and you just start piping all of that data into your own data warehouse, then it's there to do whatever you want to do. We have a pub sub integration that we have been testing out, which again is just basically a stream that you can get everything that we have running, and then you can do all of that data blending analysis and hand it off to your data team. So that's the enriched first-party data. I think we have someone here that can talk about zero-party data.
Yeah, so zero-party data is, hopefully most people here know now, it's just survey data. So it was rebranded a bit by Forrester about 2-3 years ago. Kind of how we view the world with Faring is we're trying to take survey data that's always been put into the research corner, quarterly reports, maybe you're paying an outside firm to do survey research, into more of the operational kind of marketing tech stack corner. So zero-party data helps refine that and is a better definition, I think, for the industry than just like survey data. But it's pretty much how do you loop in what we call direct from consumer data, structured data into your existing MarTech stack to help you make better decisions and kind of understand the landscape a bit better. So the example that Brad alluded to and tried to avoid was the attribution. How did you hear about us? We're powering about 1 million of those questions a day at this point. And that's going into tools like Source Medium, TikTok now, Meta soon, and like all of these other platforms to provide better signal directly from customers. So the one point to get across with zero-party data is like, how do you use it to enrich and make better decisions across your whole business? And don't think of it as something that kind of is done quarterly by an insights team.
Next up, so Dylan will be up here in a bit from Heat Map, but for this layer, it's getting into that behavior tracking, qualitative data. That is something that's near and dear to my heart. That was going back to the Elevar story, when we used to ingest data, that was our secret sauce 4 or 5 years ago, was we didn't just rely on page view data, it was doing that intimate tracking of what are people doing on site, tying that to conversion rate, so we can actually tie clicks to conversion rate. That's still, to me, if you are not doing that, whether it's through heat mapping tools, event tracking for sure, but that way you can get more of the granular conversion rate data. So we're just not looking at 100 people clicking, this item on main navigation, it might be a 0% conversion rate. But if you know it's a 5% conversion rate versus a category item on the right side is 2%, you can make different decisions there. So that's as we are starting to ladder up here into the analytics stack. And that data, again, as Faye will go into here in a minute, the more that you're just tracking this, it allows more of the automation that is becoming just readily available for everybody, where it's not going to rely on a human to go through and look at and do those comparisons and pick out cohorts based on event tracking. Just track it and let the machines do their work and surface those insights for you, because that's not an if, it's a when. That's an everyday thing for us. Next up on the ladder, marketing and ops data. Anyone want to take that? Faye, maybe I'll let you touch on maybe that, and then the omni-channel data as well.
Yeah, I mean, marketing and ops data has been a big focus, because if you don't have inventory, that actually hinders your marketing efforts, right? If you're out of stock, you can't put budgets towards certain landing pages, right? And, inventories has become especially important, especially with Amazon. If you run out of stock, that's actually quite punitive from their side in terms of rankings. So being able to connect those two data sources together and, have a holistic way of understanding inventory forecasting on top of your actual growth goals, definitely being one of the big topics for us.
Now let's talk about Amazon, Walmart, retail.
Yeah.
What is that? That's outside of my world. I know Ron from Avi. We were at dinner last week. You were sharing some learning lessons, as you guys are in every Walmart now. How many thousands? 4,200. Yeah, clap it up. So yeah, grab Ron and Ash if you want some learning lessons, as they've been, how many months now? 6. How many months have you been in Walmart? 3 months? Okay. Is Will from Biome here? We were chatting last night. I think he's about to go into Target. Anyways, sorry. Just trying to make sure we're lively here. People aren't falling asleep.
Yeah, we do quite a bit of Amazon data. I mean, it's tricky. One of the reasons people come to us for is because we kind of normalize that to, essentially the same taxonomy that you are able to understand your Shopify data. We're beginning to see a lot of Walmart.com, but we're also seeing, quite a bit of ad spend going into driving traffic towards Walmart.com, Target.com, and Walmart physical and Target physical. So that's where a lot of the zero-party data has been coming in is, and then I think on the Amazon advertising side, that's actually been the fastest growing spend source that we've seen. And we're beginning to see people hearing about the brand from Amazon, which has been really interesting. So
you're getting that through the zero party, through the post-purchase survey?
Yeah. So, you might see Google CPC, but they actually heard about the brand from Amazon, So Amazon brand advertising as a category, as a subcategory of Amazon advertising has been growing very fast as well within that. So really interesting to see that.
And maybe just share the Walmart or Target other examples. And maybe Matt, you've seen this as well, but because you can do the geofencing targeting, but it seems like you can extract insights just from the post-purchase data, even if your marketing geofencing tests are inconclusive. So maybe just unpack that a little bit for everybody.
Yeah, seeing the crossover to the kind of owned e-commerce site is like the easiest way is obviously just to ask your customers. I think the thing we've been surprised about looking at our aggregate data is we work with a few brands who have 10, 20, 30 storefronts that they've opened in the last few years, and that has become their highest source of how did you hear about us for new customers. So they're able to
through the site. So they hear about them through the store, but they're seeing
it's
the
like
store.
I'm walking down King Street here. I see Faherty. Like, what's Faherty? I've never heard of this. I go online and I buy. So it's always been somewhat of a billboard, but it's a little bit easier to measure as far as that goes, just by looping in customers. So goes into your customer acquisition cost, everything, if you're thinking about how to amortize retail.
Yeah. All right, so the next one, I'm not gonna let you answer this one as we get into the business intelligence. And so John, for those that, again, John on the podcast, we get more compliments about John being on there because he just simplifies everything. I tend to go in the weeds really quickly. So John, I think you do a great job of just simplifying into frameworks. Like cookies, it was a barcode, like you're getting stamped with a barcode. So when you hear the word business intelligence, and John has owned a couple stores, sold a couple brands himself, so he's lived in many of your seats and lived in your world. What does business intelligence mean to you based on the first 40 minutes of today and all of your experience?
I think it's asking questions outside the context of what you can get from something like GA4. So like beyond the confines of that and understanding that, like you've said, something like GA4 is necessary. So there's things in GA4 you'll never be able to do without, I'd say. Something like signals. You can't do what signals gives you. You're not going to be able to build a browser like Chrome and get all that data. But there's a world outside of GA4 that probably is a place you should be asking questions that you just can't answer in GA4. And also, GA4 gives you a certain context to think in that you really don't have to. And I think everyone's sort of, over many people are sort of stuck in that context. So to me, when I think business intelligence, I'm thinking answering questions outside of that context. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to hand the clicker over to you. So in the world of automation, we won't turn this into an AI conference, but it's coming. So you can see a couple of examples there. Got the power of the clicker.
Thank you, Brad. Really appreciate it.
Do you want to stand up?
Sure.
All right,
yeah,
I'll
stand up. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to walk through the integration work that we've been exploring together. So excited to share that with everybody here today. So essentially what we do is we provide state-of-the-art data infrastructure for brands. We enable their teams to make quick and confident decisions by providing them with advanced reporting and data activation solutions. Work with some brands, and many of them, we actually share with Elevar, which is how we actually initially started to chat. So I'm glad we already did the primer, but I think I didn't even put third-party data on there. I think that was going to be a little bit too much. But second-party, that's kind of where you could purchase certain data like demographics or creditworthiness data to enrich your profile. But the problem with all of these different parties of data, right, is that they don't inherently talk to each other. So the state of the art as we stand right now is really about piping them all into a data warehouse environment and essentially having a choice in terms of how you want to join them together to get to this kind of holy grail of unified customer profile, right, where you can do things like personalization, advanced segmentation, and eventually syncing that back to your ESPs and advertising platforms in the forms of audiences. So the thing about the first-party data is that every brand is continuously generating that basically constantly, right? Just by virtue of anybody visiting your website, you're generating first-party data, right? So, I think the thing that I've been trying to tell everybody is, right, that's a strategic asset that you have, which has a lot of value to it. So when we first started chatting with Elevar, we were having a lot of issues with GA4, right? Because we do have this garbage in, garbage out problem. And I just kind of was mind blown by just kind of taking a step back and realizing, well, Elevar is sending the data to GA4, right? So if we can essentially get a hold of this data and figure out what we can do with it, that can be really, really interesting for our mutual customers, right? So just quickly walking through the architecture here, which I'm sure most people are already familiar with, right? There's website activities, conversion events that can go obviously beyond the purchase, right? Add to cart, start checkout, et cetera. Very rich attribution information like UTMs, landing page, referrer domains, and also line item information like product and SKUs. And what Elevar does is that it sort of collects, aggregates, reconciles, and enriches that right into a standardized format and sends it off to its various integrations. So, when we got a hold of the data, we were pretty excited to dive in. So what are the different aspects of the Elevar data, right? So it's sort of centered around this concept of events, right? So, and it's related metadata. So things like viewing a key page, adding to cart, remove from cart, et cetera. And then the middle part here is the attribution information, right? Your UTMs, click IDs, ad IDs, and also the various other IDs, right? I mean, I'm counting 4 IDs here that allows us to actually create a full user journey thanks to the work that Elevar does in terms of session enrichment. And then on the right-hand side, anytime Elevar gets exposed to PII and it's able to send that along with the event, right? So that's where you get contact info addresses, but also IP and user agent, which we can use to deduce device type and browser type. So, I kind of try to create the most simple example here in terms of how these IDs can all sort of work together. Again, this is a happy path, right? They're not converting on Tor browser here. So, if we look at, so let's say this hypothetical customer converted over 3 visits, right? In the first visit, they just looked at a PDP. Second visit, they added to cart. Third visit, they purchased, right? So as you can see, each one of those visits will have a different session ID. But if Elevar is able to essentially figure out that it's the same person, right, it'll assign it the same user ID over time. But then as you can see, the order ID and the customer ID doesn't get generated till the purchase actually happens. But because we have that user ID as the consistent join key, we can actually tie all of the pre-purchase events to the purchase itself, and essentially walk back into all the funnel events that have led to the eventual purchase. So that's as into the weeds as I'm gonna get. But as a brand, like what can I do with that, right? So I'm gonna present just 3 super simple examples that we've prototyped with our, with actually 2 of our shared customers. So one is kind of this notion of a near real-time analysis on key events, right? Near real-time meaning it's not like fresh to the minute or to the second or whatever, but it's probably lagging back like a few hours or a couple hours depending on your setup there. Right, so very commonly, like, oh, our add to cart was down today starting after lunchtime, essentially, compared to a previous period, right? That could be the previous day or same day last week. So, one of the simplest ways to really kind of figure out why certain things are down is just to break it down into different dimensions, right? So in this example, we broke it down by the source medium. So just real quick, the lighter line is actually the comparison period. And that's where you can very quickly visually deduce like, okay, yeah, Google CPC is one of our problem areas. And then of course you can then hone in on that and break it down by things like landing page or products. The second use case here is the funnel conversion rate monitoring, which we've already kind of touched on. So being able to see your various conversion rate from PDP to add to cart, et cetera. But again, the thing here is there's no sampling, right? This is the full data set that is being sent to not only GA4, but also Meta, Klaviyo, Sendling, Attentive, whatever, right? So that is essentially what the brand would be using as the source of truth for all of the data that's being sent. So being able to essentially get value out of that data directly is what we're super excited about. And in this case, we're actually breaking that down by, for example, landing page, which from our preliminary testing, we've been able to essentially increase our landing page coverage to orders by 2x plus by just plugging the Elevar data into our data layer, which is super exciting. The third example here is zero-party attribution enrichment. That's been super, super popular for us. This actually work with Fairing out of the box. So this is where you can begin to actually unpack your source medium, right? So the first thing that Elevar helps us solve is, we were able to have significantly higher UTM coverage. We're looking at about 10 to 15% just out of the box. But then after we kind of reduce some of those direct nones, the next thing always is, well, how can I sort of go deeper with this, right? So especially Google CPC, which is something that we're all familiar with. And as you can see here, it unpacks into YouTube here. And that's actually been one of the primary ways that some of our customers have been able to scale YouTube, because you can actually use that as a proxy for how YouTube is performing. So this is actually a older version. So I'm actually not going to look at the left-hand side because that gets a little bit too in the weeds, but it's essentially how we stack the data together. So, previously we had essentially the settled order data from Shopify, right? So that's where we're able to give you like order revenue and discounts and refunds and different sorts of attributes like discount code, zero-party attribution, subscription one time, right? That's going to match with what you see in Shopify. Combine that with your customer profile, but now also adding the Elevar events data on top. And it's really for us about what are the analytical questions you can actually ask as a result of having this data, and really kind of go backwards from there to build your reports, right? So, things like how many days are elapsing between, let's say, the add to cart event and the purchase, right? How many sessions does it take for a purchase to happen, right? How do we, what landing pages are actually important as assisting touch points, right, before that final landing page, the conversion. So all of these are actually now like able to be answered by adding the Elevar data on top of our product. Zero-party enrichment, right? So then that's basically about all of the stuff that I just talked about. Now add the zero-party data on top of that, right? So beyond just how did you hear about us, obviously, like, consumer preferences, volunteer demographics data, psychographics data, right? So, some of the questions here that we're being able to answer, for example, right? Do we have different behaviors for customers that heard about us from Amazon or let's say Walmart or retail compared to other segments of our customers, right? If a customer has said that they prefer strawberry flavor, right? Are we able to consistently land those folks on our strawberry landing page, for example, right? So that's where you can actually begin to detect some of the more interesting and nuanced optimization opportunities within your funnel. All of this obviously is possible if, again, you start having a data warehouse and manage that yourself. But if you are on Elevar and Source Medium, I'm sure other partners will be building integrations as well, and that becomes pretty easy. So, starting today, we have beta available for select customers. So on the left here, just a quick, again, architectural overview of kind of how it works with our product, but mostly it's being consumed by either our hosted dashboard or folks are consuming that data directly in their warehouse of choice because we can actually move that data over as well. But in upcoming releases, we're excited about, essentially being able to create the full customer journey from page view to conversion by essentially stitching a lot of those IDs together that I talked about. Even higher UTM match rates by being able to fall back to the add to cart and start checkout UTMs, right? And then adding higher data refresh frequencies because we actually get these Elevar events data in real time. And eventually joining that with performance marketing data for campaign and ad level visibility because you actually also get, for example, Facebook Ad ID and Google Click ID and Facebook Click ID. And all of those are joinable with the data that you already have and own.
Hey, do you mind if I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Does everyone understand what he means about joining data? So I thought it might be good just to give a general overview for those that may not be as technical as you are. Maybe just give a context, like what does that mean, joining data together?
Yeah, so it's really about finding, an ID, right, in the data that you can sort of make sense of and agree upon, right? That's something that we can join, right? So if there is an ID that's that we know is working a specific way, so in this case, the user ID being the consistent thread, right? We can use that to essentially say, well, this add to cart event doesn't have, let's say, an order ID or a customer ID because an order hasn't happened yet. But we have that user ID, and then we also have the eventual purchase, which also has that same user ID, but now we have the order ID and the customer ID, right? So as a result of that, you can pretty confidently say, yeah, that add to cart led to that purchase. But once you kind of get into, for example, second-party data and things like that, but also with Amazon data and even TikTok shop data, which works similarly to Amazon data, you can only use certain things like maybe address, right, or certain parts of an address to be able to do that. But there's other kind of innovative ways, but that's kind of, you always have to essentially join data together in order to create a richer data set that enables more analytical questions to be answered.
Kind of like a VLOOKUP.
Correct.
In Google Sheets or Excel. Two different order ID in Shopify, order ID in Google Analytics. You want to look at that data together and use that order ID.
Yeah, exactly.
Is anyone doing that with any omni-channel data? Anyone doing address blending across their D2C? Maybe share just a few insights on what some of your customers are doing as they're maybe some of the more advanced blending and keying off of unique data sources.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much an unsolved problem, and this is especially tricky for folks that have a big presence on Amazon, because I think one of the challenges when it comes to brand awareness, right, is, let's say I hear about a brand on YouTube, I may start off on Amazon.com or the website or Google.com, right? So then all of a sudden you got, just an Amazon sale that you don't know where it came from. Then you have Google CPC and you have direct none, right? Those becomes kind of your options, right? So really kind of being able to look at what are the, and one of the things with Amazon data is that they're very, very strict about PII. So it's hard to kind of get to a certainty around like, okay, this person looks on 123, Bond Street, right, in New York or whatever. So, we're looking at a combination of things, right, but address, certain parts of the address being one of those things. But there's a lot of interesting solutions coming out, right, with QR codes and things of that nature that you can put into your product or your retail location that allows you to volunteer your PI information to the brand. And then from there, obviously, you can then join them together. But, I'm not seeing that as much in the wild, but that could be one of the things that ends up happening more for sure.
Just one quick example on joining data. One not so obvious thing is if you have, let's say you have a customer who's made a purchase on 2 different devices. If you have their email address, which you will, you can actually see those 2 sessions connected. Whereas in something like GA4, unless you're doing something really special, you would never be able to connect those 2 sessions from that user on 2 different devices. So just to kind of ground this conversation and make like something give some concreteness to it, it's those kinds of things that you just can't accomplish in GA4 unless you're doing a lot of thinking about exactly how you would do that.
Yeah. And then, of course, with GA4, there's challenge around data settlement time and sampling and things of that nature as well, alongside the different scopes that we discussed as well.
I've never heard anyone complain about sampling. I've never seen. AJ, have you seen anybody writing and asking why there's a delay? He's answering a question right now.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, that was my horrible joke, so I broke up the presentation. So keep
okay, no worries. Yeah, happy to take any other questions, from the audience.
Is that it? You're done?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, I just have like a, come to sourcemedium.com/Elevar. That's. But I'm excited to essentially offer, for everybody tuning in. All Elevar customers are eligible to receive a free data audit, extended trial, and $100 in gift card if you start the trial with us. So,
John, any?
That's all I got.
Yeah, you got one cheer. So before we open up for Q&A, we give everyone a couple minutes just to think about questions you have for any of these guys, any of the topics we just went through. John, I'm gonna tee you up for the what we were talking about last week. Maybe just talk through some of the questions that you had asked before, just a mad rush up to Faye, like, hey, or the Dacity guys of, hey, look, we need this. What would you advise people before they jump into like, hey, we need this? What are some questions that you might just ask, like, hey, I'm just gonna tee it there because I got nothing. Go.
Well, maybe an indirect way to answer your question is I would suggest that you're going to hear this over and over today, I think, that you get your hands dirty with the data in BigQuery. It's not more difficult than what many of you are probably doing in spreadsheets. It's actually probably more straightforward, to be honest, but it is a new way of thinking. It's unusual. It's a kind of code, but it's not really. But there's a great tool called Hex, and it allows you to bring this data in really easily from your big export. So this, I know this is sounding complicated, but it's actually not. It's pressing a button in GA4.
Will you demo later? Will you demo over lunch? Show people how to do it?
No.
Live demo.
And then what you really need to do is just do some queries and see what's available to you that's not available in GA4, because that's where I think a lot of new questions can start coming up. For example, I was looking at stores data last week, and I was looking at events and how they're related to purchases, and I noticed that remove from carts, oddly enough, are very strongly related to purchases. So something like in this particular data set, 70% of people who had removed from cart made a purchase, which is sort of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But it's not something you would ever know without sorting through some of this data and seeing it outside the context of GA4. So I think the biggest thing to do is you need to see the whole spectrum. And the way to do that is to get your hands dirty. Yeah.
Yeah. Another way is go look at your Slacks, emails, text messages to your team, your agencies, your contractors. Yeah. What questions are you asking them? Why is this product not selling? Why are we down last week? Why? Find those questions. And I think that's what we were chatting through last week of before just diving into the deep end of wiring everything up, and then you find yourself, you have analysis paralysis of I don't know what questions to ask. Can you just build me a dashboard? Let's find those questions, because those questions will naturally lead into building reporting that is valuable to you that you can use. So with Q4 here, you might be able to anticipate some of those questions that you may be asking of why is Friday down compared to last year? Is it because sales were pulled back, or what to anticipate Monday? Forecasting, I think you can start getting into forecasting. So those are the questions as we keep even the second session and just talking about questions, just find the right questions and you'll get the right answers. All right, we have about 5 minutes for Q&A. Who has questions on anything that we just talked through?
I'm gonna say one thing about BigQuery too. With ChatGPT and like the resources, if you just dump the data into BigQuery and you're trying to explore it, querying it, like there's some pretty intense like SQL to query it. It's all fairly readable, but if you're having trouble, like just use ChatGPT and it can write the whole query for you. Like
what's an example? Like what's the prompt that you'd give ChatGPT?
You can literally grab a query from all these like blogs and whatnot about querying GA4, and if you're trying to augment it, you could just put the actual query into ChatGPT, tell it how you want to augment it, and it'll spit it out. It's kind of like, it's a little sad as far as the art of writing beautiful code in SQL is going away, but at least we're a B2B SaaS, so we don't use GA4, we use GA4 to BigQuery that dumps into Metabase, which is kind of our source of truth. So we track like channels and everything's categorized, especially for the Shopify App Store, and we've done all of that. It took me like an hour and a half to set up. It probably would have taken like 8 hours of writing everything from scratch just by using ChatGPT and being lazy. So
Guilty.
Really good, yeah. And it'll also help you. We spoke about joining, and we think a lot about joining at Fairing. Like we actually have an order ID dependency right now across our platform. So we can't ask one of your customers or even an email address a question unless we have an order ID, because we want to be able to join that to customer data. So thinking about joining data, jumping into BigQuery will help you understand, okay, I have Klaviyo here, I have Source Medium, Elevar, et cetera. How do I think about all of my tools in a more aggregate level? And to John's point, exploring BigQuery is like one of the easiest ways to get started. I learned SQL like 5 years ago after being a merchant for like 8 years, and probably am one of the biggest fanboys after exporting to Excel and then pivoting and VLOOKUPing. So definitely advise everyone to get started.
I do have one prompt that I've done that seems to work is you export a portion of the data, but all the columns, load it into advanced analysis. I think you got code interpreter. and essentially just say, hey, given this CSV, I have this analytical question. Can you give me the SQL? And then it becomes a process of refining your analytical question, which actually turns out to be a pretty useful skill to work with, data people in general. And it's a great way to kind of like explore and essentially learn from the AI and working with the AI. So
we were Vishal on our team, some of you may know Vishal, he was sharing a tool that was automated. I actually don't know the name off the top of my head, but we were going to try to live stream him in and him showing how to, again, use AI to start answering some of these questions, but we didn't make it work. So Vishal, if you're listening, we'll do a webinar or something. All right, questions? Who has any? AJ, right here. What's your name? Jackie. All right.
This might be less of a question and more of a cry for help, but you talked a bit about inventory. Inventory forecasting at our company right now is a pretty manual process. Any recommendations or softwares or any sort of thing that could help speed up the process and save a little bit of time for the team?
Yeah, I think one of the things when we kind of get into that problem with our customers is really first of all, like we don't have all the inventory data, so I think if that's sort of already solved, let's say you have your inventory synced to Shopify pretty well, and you're happy with that, and ChatGPT is actually a great starting point, to be honest, right? Really kind of exporting that out and say, hey, given our 12 months of inventory data, can you give me a forecasting model? That'll help me forecast what, on a SKU basis where I'm going to be, next 30 days or 90 days and what have you. But I think one of the things that is important to make sure to add in there from a correlational analysis perspective is, the traffic that you're driving to these PDPs and the marketing spend that's actually happening and impressions that's actually happening, because those are very much linked together, right? If you stop driving traffic there, sales for that SKU will go down and you won't have an inventory problem all of a sudden, right? So making sure you're kind of connecting the demand side with the supply side, and making sure that that's all sort of fully contextualized. Then the actual analysis part becomes easier just because we have these tools available to us now, and we didn't before, and most people honestly just did it with like very simple Excel models in the past.
Sounds like Jackie might be beelining to after.
Yeah.
I think someone else had a question. Yep, go for it.
Hey, this is a question for Matt. So I'd love to get your take on.
Yeah, I don't think that mic is.
Good? All right.
Yeah.
This is a question for Matt. So wanted to get your take on where a post-purchase survey can kind of fit into, especially a larger merchant's kind of existing post-purchase efforts where they might already have email, SMS campaigns set up. We've gotten pushback from large merchants that somehow think it might undermine like their existing efforts. So would love your perspective on that.
Can you repeat the question a little bit? That I can't hear you as well.
Oh, sorry. So where do you see a post-purchase survey tool like Faring sitting for a larger merchant in their existing tech stack where they oftentimes already have existing post-purchase email and SMS flows set up, and they sometimes might feel like a post-purchase survey tool that is immediately after that purchase on, say, like the checkout page is going to undermine their existing efforts. We've heard that. Don't know if it's based in any reality, but would love your perspective on that.
Yeah, as far as how to prioritize those things, I think the one thing to note on that order confirmation page, like our average completion rate on our survey is like high 40s, like 48% right now. So what we urge everyone to think about survey data is more so like think of it like GA data, like GA4 data, for example, something that you would never turn off. You're never going to turn off GA4 for a week or turn off your meta pixel for a week because that data is already kind of helping inform decisions across your whole marketing stack. So as far as getting over like with sending emails and SMS, if someone's trying to send surveys via email and SMS, you're going to get a 5 to 8% opt-in through there. So you're not going to capture enough data to really extrapolate with a high confidence interval. So as far as how we like do selling with our product, it's usually finding a specific problem, and whether it's around attribution with, hey, YouTube podcasts maybe is a really easy layup, where something might not seem like it's working, and then you start asking customers, and it's very clear it is. So as far as getting over that conversation with merchants, I would probably not push like our whole suite of solutions and focus on something very particular that zero-party data can then help solve, and then start checking boxes. It's like, okay, you mentioned email and SMS. It's like, pipe that zero-party data into Klaviyo. And the example Brad gave before, there's hundreds of those examples.
Or SendLane.
Or SendLane, sorry. Pipe that data into SendLane, and now you have this beautiful data point to start segmentation. So segmentation in email is always a pain. It's what people purchased, maybe what pages they visited. And now if you're asking a simple question like, how would you describe yourself? You have this beautiful persona data point to then go send more targeted emails and increase ROI on that channel. So that's how I would structure as far as approaching that problem with those merchants.
Alrighty, so that wraps up the first 2 sessions for this morning. Just to give a little, give these guys a round of applause. Thank you.